Hi, Scott here from Introvert Power. In this video I'm going to give an INFJ's take on ENFJs. I think for the ENFJ, if we just looked at the extroverted feeling function just on its own, because it's a judgment function, unfiltered or uninfluenced by the other functions, it can be naturally too quick to make judgments. I don't really even like using the word judgment in this context. So it's more like it can make conclusions or assumptions on things without all the information. And in that respect, I kind of see the FE as kind of, it's like an arrow. It can be like an arrow, or it can be quite direct in its conclusions or assumptions when it's completely on its own, without any other influences. The way I sort of see the introverted intuition working in the ENFJ is that the NI kind of branches the feeling out more in a way. It's like it sort of busts the arrow apart, and it kind of brings it more like a fan, if you like. So it's softer, it's warmer, and the FE is more informed with the intuition, the insights, the alternative narrative, if you like, that the NI can bring, kind of breaks the FE up to being more accommodating, if you like, or more receivable to more people. And I can just see that being, I sort of see that as a nice picture to sort of describe how the NI sort of impacts on the FE function. And that the more that introverted intuition is developed, the greater the influence that the ENFJ has on the people in their world. The extroverted sensing function is like the perfect foundation for these two functions, because it helps to ground the ENFJ in the moment, and that, I think, helps to inform how the NI and the FE is used to impact the world around them, because they're able to pick up on what's happening in the here and now. I think for the ENFJ and the INFJ is that their ultimate goal, I guess as being idealists too, is their ultimate goal of helping others to meet their needs is the same. I think it looks the same. It's just both types achieve it differently. I sort of see the ENFJ as being, they're more out there with their desire for change and helping others. You can see it more, I think. Whereas the INFJ, they're more subtle and quiet about it. An INFJ will be doing it with few, whereas the ENFJ will be doing it with the many. So in some respects, then, ENFJ wants an open revolution. They want their cause to be acted upon in a real obvious way, and it needs to be seen by people, and it's an open revolution. Whereas I see the INFJ as the quiet revolutionists. They go about helping people to have quiet inner revolutions, if you like, that bring about liberation and freedom within the self. But it's done quietly. I sort of see the INFJ as trying to have deep and profound impact within the worlds of others, but doing it as quietly and as softly as possible. So while the INFJ affects the few deeply, the ENFJ wants to affect as many people as possible, and will do that with as much influence as they possibly can, given who they are and the environment that they're in. For instance, if they're teachers, they'll have a certain amount of influence in that arena, and their currency, if you like, is influence. They do as much as they can with their influence. So while both are seeking to help meet the needs of others and bring about change in others, the style is very different. And I think that might sort of also tie in with the ENFJ's label as being manipulative. But I think that's inaccurate. I think it's a misunderstanding, because the motive is to bring about change in others. And I think it's the same for INFJs, whereas you can see it happening in an ENFJ. You can see them doing it. Whereas the INFJ has the ability to impact and influence in a profound way, but done so gently that it can't be noticed, or it's harder to see in the actions, if you like, and the approach of an INFJ. So both the INFJ and the ENFJ have the ability to see what's happening on the surface as well as what's happening underneath, and both have the ability to see how what's happening underneath is affecting what is happening on the surface of things, what is able to be seen, and both set about influencing what can't be seen to bring about change in what can be seen. I think one of the vulnerabilities for the ENFJ is when their efforts to help another to bring about change and growth is either not recognised, not appreciated, or not noticed. And just depending, I think, where an ENFJ is at the time, there is a vulnerability to be upset with that lack of appreciation or response to what the ENFJ brings. And of course, if that does happen, it's going to be through that FE function, that disappointment and hurt, I guess you could say, would be expressed. I think it's the same for the INFJ too. They have a similar vulnerability to not feeling appreciated or being frustrated or hurt by the lack of response or maybe even respect to a certain extent in regards to what the INFJ brings. But because the FE is in the auxiliary position, and being introverted, they're not as likely to express it. But it's probably a catch-22, because for the INFJ, it probably takes more disappointment or hurt or whatever for the INFJ to express it, but because there's probably built up pressure, it could come across very strong. Whereas the ENFJ might express that that disappointment or that hurt a little more frequently, but not as intense, because it's not going to be in a pressurized state for as long. Because the ENFJ and INFJ are idealists, we can have a tendency to see the absolute best in other people, which is, in a sense, our best and our worst trait, because we need that in order to be who we are in the world. But I think it can do one of a few things. When people pick up on our idealized image of these people, which is kind of like, the ENFJ and INFJ can see where what a person can become, and the ENFJ will speak into what they see that person becoming, and that is both very empowering to others, but it also could be disempowering, because people could feel that they just don't live up to that image, or feel maybe if they have a low self-esteem or something, could be unmotivated by the where they feel they're at versus where the ENFJ is, the image that the ENFJ has of them, which can be a demotivator. And that's a bit of a paradox, because that would go totally against the whole purpose and drive of an ENFJ and their desire for others and what they want for people. And but I guess it's just one of those things to look out for. One thing I think I notice about ENFJs, just as an observation, is that they're like they're with that extroverted feeling and being extroverted. Their body language is quite animated and obvious, but their eyes seem sort of introverted in a way. That it's like their eyes display the introverted intuition, while the rest of their body is sort of extroverted feeling. At least that's what I've sort of observed with some ENFJs. And interesting sort of seeing the body that is sort of outward focused, if you like, but with eyes that are quite looking inward. And the ENFJ's eyes, do what I guess an INFJ's eyes do, which is to, when they're talking, is to sort of look around, sort of searching for that intuition while they're talking. I think in some ways an ENFJ is kind of like the self-actualization of an INFJ, in that we can have, with that NI dominant function, coming up with all sorts of different ways of looking at something. We can have sort of a lack of drive to sort of put that out into the world. Whereas the ENFJ, with their extroverted feeling, they're much more capable, obviously, of putting their insights and their presence out into the world. So I think there can be a certain amount of envy towards the ENFJ for their ability to be able to put themselves out there. But I think that, with anything, where there's an advantage, there's also a disadvantage. And one thing I've noticed with both the INFJ and the ENFJ types is that the differences and the pluses and the minuses sort of balance each other out, with neither sort of being any further ahead. So I don't think just because the ENFJ has that extroverted feeling function as their dominant function necessarily means that means they have an advantage in life. I think another distinction between the ENFJ and INFJ is because the INFJ's FE is auxiliary. I think it can mean that it's the FE that sort of what sort of puts the NI information out into the world. Because there's so much going on in the NI space, and it's almost like it can be unconscious. I think there's an aspect where because that NI is out front, it's like it needs to sort of go back into the extroverted feeling and out, something along those lines anyway. And so some things can be missed, probably because of just the sheer volume of what's in the NI. Whereas I see for the ENFJ, because it's their extroverted feeling that's out front, and it's always its focus is always outward, and the introverted intuition isn't as prominent. I think what it can mean is that they're more able to. It's like whatever does come out of the NI can be immediately sort of moment it's noticed can be immediately put into the into the extroverted feeling function and out into the real world. And I guess I just see that as some real pluses with that, in that the sort of the NI factory, whatever it produces in the ENFJ can be immediately pushed out into the world and influencing it in the present and the here and now, especially with that tertiary extroverted sensing function helping to ground the ENFJ in the moment. So in some respects, I think for the ENFJ, there's more of a sense, I have anyway, that they're able to be a lot more, if not entirely conscious and present in what they're doing. Because that extroverted feeling function is really where they're living, and so there's a sense of being more present in it. Whereas for the INFJ, because that NI is sort of unconscious, but it's dominant, I think INFJs, myself included, we tend to live as sort of more unconsciously, for the purpose of grabbing onto that NI intuition and then putting it through the extroverted feeling. But it's like for INFJs, it's like in a way we live by faith more, and I don't mean faith in a religious sense. I mean sort of faith in the self, because often I think we're leading with intuition without really fully knowing what it is that we're being led into, but trusting that something is there. So we can often step into something not really knowing what it is to discover, but trusting that there is something there to discover, just by sensing intuitively that there's something there. But I think often we don't know what's there until we go there, which I think is a very interesting dynamic to live in. And for myself personally, I actually find that quite enriching and quite exciting. But for the ENFJ, it's kind of the opposite, but just as cool, in the sense that they're able to, like I've said, inject that introverted intuition that they pick up on in the moment, and sort of feed it directly through the extroverted feeling in the moment, and see its impact straight away. And it's like they know. It's like they get pre-warning of what it is that they're going to put out into the world before it's out there, so they can almost anticipate what's going to happen before it happens. Or at least that's my sense of it. Please, I'll be interested in ENFJ's feedback on that. Whereas for the INFJ, it's like if they're in a conversation with another person and they're really in their introverted intuition, the two of them are discovering it at the same time, in that the INFJ doesn't know what they're going to say until they're pretty much saying it or said it. And it's like they discover it, in the moment, like as it's coming out of their mouths, and then can see its impact on the person in front of them. Whereas for the ENFJ, my sense is they're able to intuit, that they pick up on the intuition before it's out there, and so they could sort of have some fun with it, I think, and almost, but they may even have choice in how their extroverted feeling function puts that intuition out there. I just think that's an interesting kind of distinction between the dominant and auxiliary functions in the INFJ and the ENFJ, even with it just, even though, with the ENFJ's top two functions being switched over compared to the INFJ, it completely changes the way that it manifests itself in the person and in the world around them. So that's my take on the world of an ENFJ. I'd be really interested in people's feedback and comments about what I've shared. I'd encourage you to please like the videos and feel free to subscribe to the channel. I endeavour to do videos and all the other types in the future. And thanks for watching, and click the link for part 3.